Hello everybody and welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. My name is Deborah Hatswell and you're listening to BBR Investigations. Our cases tonight include cryptids, missing people and the Scottish connection. Over the last few weeks I've shared with you the strange case of the lady who went missing in December of 2022 and was found deceased in the fields in the opposite direction of town. She'd never been named and the car she was driving was not registered to her. Only a small public announcement was made about her death and the strange circumstances of her disappearance. The coroner ruled that she had been predated on by animals and was found with no shoes on, even though it was a cold winter's night. That case took place in Monton, on the main road leading into the small town. Whilst working this case, I realised there were several missing people in the town who, as of yet, are still missing. And I wondered if there was a connection between the strange deaths, the missing people, and the reports in the area of a large dog-like or canine-like creature that's been seen running on two legs and also down on all fours like a wolf. I was contacted by residents of the town who had their own experience to share. One which works at the nearby aerospace facility that sits alongside the airport. She saw a creature one morning after she was dropped at the facility gate and walked up to the building where she worked. The creature emerged from a shed connected to the apprentice block. She, of course, was terrified by the creature, which luckily ran off as she quickly got inside. Running the experience through her head brought back a memory she had as a child when she was meant to camp out with a friend one night. This is her experience, in her own words, read out by myself. Then we'll have a look at other areas in Scotland when there are a number of cryptid creature cases along with a number of strange disappearances. One very similar to the Monton one, where a young man was seen running from a farmhouse, disappearing into the woods, and he's never been seen again. But let's start with Monton. Our witness said, "Me and my best friend had the idea of camping out in her garden in the summer of 1994. I was 14 at the time. My friend lived in a big house about a mile and a half, 2 miles from Monton village. The house was in the countryside with woods down one side and curving around the bottom. Huge garden. Honestly, it was idyllic. Her dad found his old tent and we set about putting it up. Well, we helped while her dad put it up. We put pillows and quilts inside as we didn't have sleeping bags, and we asked her dad to take us to the shops for sweets and crisps, and we were going to make a night of it. So we were gone maybe an hour or so, and we went into the town of Ayr. When we got back, we went in the house and headed through the house to come out the back door to the tent. When we got outside, we immediately saw that the tent was wrecked. We just stood there, and her dad was like, "What's wrong with you two?" And then he saw the tent. It was all torn up, big tears and rips in it. The cloth was tattered. And this wasn't really an old tent, and it wasn't a cheap, crappy tent. It had kind of collapsed inwards on one side, and we walked over to look at it. My friend's dad studied the rips and was looking closely at them, and then he said to us, "Let's go inside, girls." I remember we were annoyed, as it was a lovely day, but we did as he said. We went inside, sat in the big lounge, kind of sulking that our plans had been coshed. When her mum came in from work, we told her what had happened to the tent, and she said she was sympathetic, and she said it was probably the local yobs, from the nearby village that had done it out of sheer badness. So that night we stayed in. We'd been out looking forward to camping, but we just camped out in the room instead, ate our sweets, watched a film. We did chat about it, but we didn't think of anything sinister, nothing scary. We just really agreed with her mum. So we went to bed. In the middle of the night, we were woken up by this almighty racket. Her dogs were going absolutely ballistic downstairs. She had a Labrador and a German Shepherd. The dogs were in the lounge directly below us. They were crashing about, barking. It was quite loud. We opened a bedroom door and her mum and dad came rushing out of their room and said for us to get back in. We waited for them to head downstairs and then we opened the bedroom door again to listen. Her dad was shouting, "Let the dogs out, let them out." and we were saying to each other, what the fuck's going on? So the dogs were let out, and they were barking and snarling and going crazy around the back of the house. We quickly went along to her big sister's room as it faced the back garden. She was away on holiday. We looked out the window and we could see the dogs chasing something past the fish pond down towards the woods at the bottom of the garden. There's a tall, dark shape, running on two legs, slightly hunched, running very fast. We both saw it. The security lights were on, but by the time they were past the pond, it wasn't as easy to see, as there were bushes and cherry trees, and the security lights didn't reach down that far. Her dad was standing on the decking with his shotgun just below us, and we were scared in case he looked up and saw us, so we snuck back down the hall and went into her room. We were nervous and scared, but kind of excited too. She thought it must have been an intruder. I asked her if her dad would have shot him, and she said probably not, but he probably took the gun out just to scare him. We waited for Mum and Dad to come back upstairs, and it seemed like ages. When we heard the stairs creak, we opened the door, and it was her Mum. We asked her what had happened, and was it a burglar? And she said, yeah, it must have been a burglar, but the dogs chased him off. She said that her dad was going to go to sleep downstairs just to be on the safe side, and we should just stay in our room. She asked if we wanted to go into her room with her, and we're like, no, it's fine. Although we didn't sleep for the rest of the night, we were too worked up. In the morning, we went downstairs, and her Mum and Dad were talking quietly in the kitchen. We were asking questions about the night before, and her dad said it was obviously a prowler looking for houses to break into. He said he'd ring the police and let them know. So later that day, just before I was going home, a guy arrived at the house. When we saw him arriving, I asked my friend who it was, and she said it was the farmer who lived down the road. He spoke to my friend's dad for a bit, then left. Being nosy teenagers, we asked what he wanted, and her dad said, oh, he's having some trouble with foxes getting into his chickens. I don't think, he's happy about it. And I wondered why he'd come down to tell them that, but he did. They didn't have any animals themselves other than dogs. On the way home, we actually drove past his farm, and as we were driving past, we could see him on his tractor and trailer. The trailer had a few dead sheep on it. The legs were sticking up, and it gave us the creeps. My friend said to her dad, oh, Dad, look at the poor sheep. And her dad just said, it's bad when you lose sheep. He never mentioned the chickens. Nothing else happened. The intruder never come back, and things just went back to normal. So cut to a few weeks later, and we're back at school, and a girl in my class came from a family of farmers. Their farm was just outside my village where I stay. I was talking to her about what she did over the summer, just the normal stuff, and she said that she didn't go to the local cattle show she would usually do, as a calf had been killed a few weeks back. I asked her what happened to it, and she said it had been attacked and its head was nearly ripped off. I was shocked, and I could see that she was really sad about it. I asked if it was a fox, and she said, don't be daft, a fox can't do something like that. She kind of hesitated and said, Dad said it was a shapeshifter. She said he had seen it running up the field, and it looked like half a man and half a wolf. I was getting pretty freaked out by this time. She said a calf wasn't the only animal killed. There was a farmer on the road to Monton, and his sheep had had their throats torn out, and I think those were the ones that we saw on the trailer. Another farmer had cows that were half eaten. I didn't know what to think, and then I remembered the tent and the intruder and the farmer appearing the next day. A shapeshifter. What did he mean by that? I was absolutely petrified, thinking, what if we'd been in the tent that night? I mean, the tent was destroyed during the daytime. It scared the living daylights out of me, thinking what could have happened at night. It never felt idyllic after that. It was always a very scary place to me. I moved away the following year, but there's something weird about the whole area, Deb. Could it have been the same thing I saw 5 years later? Too many strange goings on for my liking. I'm sure today is the anniversary of the woman found dead in Monton, December the 19th. Poor woman. God knows what she went through that night in those fields, alone. Makes my blood run cold. The girls and the parents must have been terrified that night, it's understandable. I'm not sure how I'd react in that situation. It seems logical to think that it was just a burglar out chancing his luck, or a local peeping Tom that the dogs had chased away. This could also be a series of very strange coincidences that have happened since at least the early 1990s up until 2022. There will be cases not reported in the mainstream press from farmers, land managers, of strange kills and missing livestock. Now, there's a great deal of research that's been done into the large cat population, as this area has so many reports of a black panther-like beast and a strange sandy-coloured dog-like creature. As you know, this is an area with a high percentage of missing people. I found 4 cases from 2020 to 2022, and for a while now I've been looking at the missing people cases in the areas where we have cryptid creature reports. If you follow the waterways and the locks that head northeast from Monton, there seems to be several areas that have clusters of strange creature reports, some of which have been investigated and researched for several years now. The locks, forests and mountain valleys have an ancient feel to them, and it is possible to walk the route from the west coast of Scotland to the east and vice versa. I believe that cryptid creatures use these routes to move around from area to area. So let's start at the very tip of the east coast, close to the Moray Firth, which was named by the Picts using their words for seashore and coast, was previously known as Elginshire. This area has many woodlands and forests and rural areas, and some of them have not changed in centuries. Then we'll visit the locks inland and follow the waterways until we reach Monton once again on the west coast. One case that is startling took place on an unnamed farm in Morayshire. This case is the hyena baboon wolf-like creature. Came into me through email, and the witness says, "Hi Deb, I was in your live chat tonight on YouTube, and I was trying to get some information to you that I've got about an animal my dad shot on our farm back in 1997 after it had killed 150 of our sheep. Plus, many more kills happened all over the area, not just on our farm. At that time, even more were going missing, and only the bones, skin and fleece were ever found. It was almost like a feeding station or an animal boneyard. As I said, my dad got his other farmer mates and some of the gamekeepers out with the spot lamps, and they eventually hunted something down in the fields that he said looked like it was a hyena and a wolf cross, but its front feet were shaped like a rat's, but longer. They were longer than my dad's hand. The men were all standing around it, and they were trying to work out what it was, and were confused because of how it looked. But they all felt it was for sure what was killing the sheep, as its canine teeth matched the ones we found on the sheep that had escaped. It was as if they were all torn and bitten to pieces, and there were hundreds of them, as we had 1,200 odd ewes on the farm at that time. I can share my story now, and I feel that I need to, as it's happening again. Recently we found what looks like a feeding nest that was full of sheep and deer bones in an old house in the woods that surrounds our farm. Back then, it was on the news in 97. They called it the beast from the east and blamed a panther for it all and buried the news. It all dates back to November 1995, when a lorry driver reported a cougar or a mountain lion on the road from Cooper to Culloden. After that, the reports flooded in, and some people had photographs of it. The animal my dad shot was not a cat, and the vets and the cops took away the body after they got it back to the farm. That it was a hyena, baboon, wolf thing, and it stank so bad, it was like the smell of a male fox, but way stronger. This thing was male, and we guessed around 300 kilos before we weighed it. We were based on a mixed arable farm with over 2,000 hectares of land. On the land we had over 2,000 sheep, 350 beef cattle, along with multiple other animals like chickens, pigs, pheasants, ducks, partridge and the like. As well as those animals, we also had local gamekeepers that stocked the land, as it's all surrounded by thick pine forests. We're in East Scotland, in Moray. I can't give an exact area, and we don't want a bunch of people up here with cameras, as all this is, we're trying to keep it quiet. There's 15 of us farmers and gamekeepers, and we'd like to keep it that way. Anyway, back in 1996, around December time, we started noticing that we were having a few sheep go missing. Around 60 at first, but then we had all our chickens killed one night. We had around 150 birds, and they were all dead. So my dad and his gamekeeper mates had a meeting one afternoon, and they agreed it could be a fox. Possibly that's what was killing the chickens, as the gamekeepers also had pheasants in big pens and enclosures that had also been killed the previous night. So in a group, they went out with the spot lamps, and around 20 of us looked in various places around our area. We were hunting for foxes, and we found them. Between my dad and the other guys, the next few months, he'd shot around 170 odd foxes. They were happy that the problem with the fox was solved, or so they thought. Things improved for a while, and by October of 1997, we were out taking in the female sheep for sorting. We usually do every year at this time of year, put the male rams in with them. And when we got to the field where they all were, they were supposed to be, there was only around 49 ewes left out of an original flock of 300. And the ones that were left were all bloody, and 10 of them had serious wounds and had to be put down. We reported this straight away, got the vets and the police involved, as my dad thought, by what he'd seen, the wounds on the sheep were canine in nature. He thought this as the sheep were basically torn apart. So we all thought it was no more than a pack of loose dogs that someone had let off the lead, as this seemed to happen a lot back then, and now. But no one ever questions if it really was a dog. The police were alerted, and they turned up, and the vets were already on scene, doing measurements of the sheep's wounds. The canine puncture marks were 6 inches wide and penetrated 4 to 5 inches into the flesh of the sheep. So they concluded it was a dog attack. But that didn't explain the other 251 ewes that were missing. There was no sign of them. They were nowhere, and the fields were just full of blood, guts, skin and fleece, and a lot of it. It was that bad, Dad had to plough the field to hide it from the main road, as we have a big road that runs in front of the farm, and you could see into the field where they were. So away went the cops, and it was eventually on the news about sheep being found ripped to bits on the neighbour's farm as well as ours. Plus, around 4 other farms had experienced the same thing happening to their sheep as well over the last year or so. The authorities suggested on the news that it could be a panther or a puma or a pack of dogs that was causing all this, but it's still unclear. And that's when my dad got the group together to look for it. It was made up of farmers and gamekeepers, and they went out with their vehicles and spotlights to see if they could track down those supposed packs of dogs, or a puma or a panther that was being blamed for killing the sheep. We were all out looking for a few hours, and we only saw a few badgers in the distance, as, with all nocturnal animals, they give off an eye shine when you hit them with a high intensity light. We saw nothing out of the ordinary until we went back to the field. The sheep had been killed in the previous days. My dad caught some eye shine around 500, 600 yards out with the spotlight. In the middle of the ploughed field, we could see something was out there looking back at us. So Dad said to my uncle that was driving to stop the vehicle. I was too young to drive. Dad got out his rifle, and it had a magnification scope on it. Took a closer look at what was basically staring at us, and it just stood still. When Dad got the rifle scope on it, he said to my uncle to bring the light off to the side so we could get a better look. And what Dad said then chilled me to the bone. He said, "It's a fucking wolf-looking thing." I could hear the fear in my dad's voice. He was trembling. All this happened in around 15 seconds, and this thing just stood down on all fours, looking at us. I heard Dad pull a bolt on the gun and let off the safety. He never took his eyes off it. And then he whispered to my uncle to turn the lights directly on it again. And when he did, my dad kind of jumped as this wolf creature stood up tall on its back legs. and was sniffing the air. And in a split second, it was back down on all fours, and it looked like it was going to leap into the tree line. But my dad let off a shot. I will always remember the deafening noise the rifle made as he pulled the trigger and hit it directly in the ribs from the left side to the right in one clean shot. We heard a thud as the bullet hit and it went down. We drove slowly over to it and was absolutely in shock at what we all saw in front of us. This animal, which my dad thought looked more like a hyena crossed with a baboon than a dog or a wolf. His front feet were the most scary thing. They looked like the front feet of a rat, but were longer, thicker than a human's. And as we were all stood round it, no one said so much as a word. We were all just shocked. Every one of us was scared to touch it. So Dad phoned the gatekeeper that was closest to us at the time, and he came round with 6 other guys, and they pulled it onto a hard-sun fertiliser bag. It was so big and heavy, and they pulled it back to the farm. In all, there were around 30 people, including the cops that came up to view it. Once they'd finished saying whatever it was they were talking about, the vets took the body away with them. We only had access to it for about 3 hours, but that was enough time to get a look at its body clearly. I would say that the closest thing I could resemble it to was from the movie American Werewolf in London. It looked like the monster in that. It was as close to a match as I could get. It looked nothing like a dog, apart from its mouth and its canine teeth, which were 6 inches apart, 5 inches long, and the bottom ones had the same kind of makeup. The other teeth we could see were really weird and kind of shaped and serrated in a way. This creature weighed 289 kilo, and as we put it in an industrial weighbridge we had. From nose to tail, it was 7 foot in length. Its tail was short, around half a foot, and stubby. It was male. It had the smell of male fox pee, but much, much stronger. It had a dark brown coloured fur around it, and it was dirty, full of soil and dried blood from having been digging in the ploughed field earlier in the night. Then the killing stopped for years and years. But I got a call from a farming friend recently, and he's got the same going on again at his place. I went up and we had a look, and it's for sure the same type of sheep killing that's happened to us all over again. We found a roe deer and one of his sheep in a field looking the same as the carcasses back in 96, 97. Then we found an old abandoned house on our farm that was filled with hundreds of sheep bones, skulls and other animals all mixed together. We think it's where they dragged them to feed on. We're currently out every second night now, especially around the full moon. Tomorrow night will be best as it's a full moon, and it was in 97. It was a full moon that night. It was definitely something to do with these creatures me and Dad have studied, so we've looked at dogmen and werewolf stuff over the years, and we've no idea what this thing was. We still don't know what it was, or is. But they are 100% real. They are physical blood and bone creatures of an almost baboon, hyena appearance, and they seem to love to eat sheep, especially fully grown 55 kilo ewes, which are very fast and strong. Yet these things just go in and kill every one of them nearly. Deb, if any of this may help some people on the channel, please use it. It might help figure out what the hell we're dealing with, as we also have black cat kills and sightings all the time in our local area. But most, if not all, are actually done by whatever this thing is. They're basically walking wolves. I'm sorry for the long story, but I like to be in depth and share all of my experiences about these creatures. We had a YouTuber get in touch, and he was meant to have met me last year up here on the farm, but he never showed up. It was around the time the woman from Ayrshire went missing, and then she was found, partially eaten by wildlife. Didn't he blame it on foxes or badgers, Deb? I think he must have just crapped himself, pardon the pun, changed his mind about coming up here. And as people who have actually physically seen these creatures know, the fear you get when you see one or hear one is possibly the hardest thing to put into words or to explain. I'd like to remain anonymous, as the exact spot and location to Protect our farm from people just walking all over them, looking for these creatures. They have no idea what they're dealing with. As from the injuries I've witnessed on our sheep, these things are very powerful, incredibly fast, agile, heavy killers. I'm unsure if the creature in this report is the same kind of creature that's harassing the people in Monton. It does have the same description. If you remember, the Ayrshire police described the creature they were looking for, that was reported by a motorist and seen by 2 officers, as baboon-like. The same description as the creature in Moray. Just south of this area is one I've been studying for several years now. I'm very lucky to have a friend and fellow researcher that lives in the area that sits between Nairn and Culloden Forest, areas where there are also numbers of missing people. Alan Morrison from Booker was reported missing in late January 2018, having last been seen on Christmas Eve. Searches for the 47-year-old have focused around his home in the Lawson Place area, with specialist teams scouring routes that he was known to walk, such as the Burn of Bucky and the coastline. Mr. Morrison is described as about 5'9" of medium build, with short, dark and grey receding hair and a beard. As of January 25th, his case remains open. Sitting in an area between 3 dogman reports, there is a strange case of Nicole Mitchell, a 26-year-old woman who was reported missing from the Moray area in early January of 2024, exactly a year ago. Officers searching for her discovered her body in Teenland Woods, south of Altonside, around 1:15 a.m. on Friday, February the 26th. Even though no cause of death was given, police said the case is now closed. In September of 2023, a body was found in the search for missing Scotch pensioner who vanished in Moray. While formal identification still needs to take place, the family of missing 75-year-old Catherine Stewart have been informed. Catherine Stewart was reported missing from Elgin after vanishing at around 11 p.m. on Monday, September the 18th. No cause of death was given, and the case remains closed. A further body was found in the search for a woman reported missing overnight. Mary Fraser was last seen in Dean Terrace in Lossiemouth at around 8 a.m. on Tuesday. A car, which she had access to, was later discovered in Inchbroom Road. Police are unsure why she was not with her vehicle. Police have now confirmed the body of a woman has been found amid the search for the 57-year-old. Formal identification is yet to take place, but the family of Miss Fraser have no doubt been informed, and the death is currently being treated as unexplained. No doubt there are other cases in the area that I'm not aware of. I've watched this place for several years, as we're lucky in the fact that we have a private researcher in the area. Over the years, as each season changed, we began to photograph and film many of the anomalies left in the area. One video shows a number of strange white orbs seen on different days, often known as ghost lights, that can be seen in the area even in bright sunlight. They seem to be intelligent and will cross the path in front of a walker. There have been deer legs left hanging high up in the trees, intricate patterns of feathers and stones, bones stacked, strange brush huts or possible hunting blinds, rocks left on top of 10 to 12-foot trees. A lady named May joined BBR many years ago now, and she's been collecting images of those strange finds in the area ever since. And she's spoken with a number of local people who have not only seen these very strange creatures, but some of them have been very close to them when the event happened. One witness, who is local to the area close to the battlefield of Culloden, made a report to May in 2015 after seeing a strange figure while she was out walking one of her usual routes. She said, "The witness wishes to remain anonymous, but states that she saw a tall, hair-covered human-like figure over at the cairns 2 weeks before she reported the incident. The creature she saw was about 7 to 8 feet tall, by her estimation. It was just at dusk, and the sighting only lasted for a few seconds. The lady watched while the thing crossed the site and made off into the trees in the direction of the battlefield. May added, "I know the battlefield's haunted. The locals speak of the sound of bagpipes that can be heard on a quiet night, and the ghosts of the Highland forces are often seen on the eve of the anniversary of the battle in April. Claver Cairns is a protected area of natural beauty. It's about half a mile from Culloden battlefield." As news of the strange sightings began to spread, our May spoke to other locals about their strange experiences. In a report taken in September of 2015, a croft owner who has a croft at the north end of the railway viaduct that runs over the River Nairn shared his experiences with May. He said, "Whilst discussing the earlier wildman sightings at Carver Clare, May was asking around to see if any of the crofters had noticed anything missing, or any lambs killed or any strange activity. So I shared my story with her. I think I saw the same figure that was described by the lady who was walking close to the battlefield. What I saw was a big hairy man that was walking along the railway line in a southerly direction from the forestry behind my croft. I seen it walking towards the viaduct area of the cairn on quite a few occasions now. My dogs were going nuts each time the figure went by. You should speak to my brother, because he's seen it too." So that's what May did, and his brother said, "I'm from the area, and I'm out in the fields late at night and early in the morning frequently. I've seen something really strange about 3 or 4 times now. I see it usually in dim light, at dawn and dusk. The first time this happened, I was out in the fields, and I heard someone walking close to where I was, and they were coming along the riverbank moving fast. So thinking it was a water bailiff or a gamekeeper, I ducked down into the brush for cover. As they passed me, whoever it was appeared to be enormous, both in height and width, and they stank to high heaven. I couldn't get a good look at them on that occasion. My clearest view of the figure was one night when I had my nets out, and I'd walked away downstream to disturb the fish as the fish panic and swim towards the nets. When I have them trapped, I go off and I wait a little while for the nets to work. I came back about half an hour later, and I saw this bloody great hairy thing, and it was pulling the fish from my nets. I shouted at it, scared it off, and I stood up holding a fish, and it just walked off into the dark. It wasn't running, it just walked off. I'm 6'3", and it was taller than me. I think this thing was around 7 foot tall, and much broader than I am." And then we had an update on the 8th of October 2020. They said, "Hey Debs, hope you're well and on the road to recovery. I'm not too sure if this is any interest to you, but there have been a series of weird goings on in the area where my relative lives, close to the area where the strange hairy figures were reported. A few weeks back now in September, he was sitting watching TV when there was a loud kind of howling noise. It sounded like a big cat. It was dark, around 10:30 p.m, but his German Shepherd dog shot to the window with his hackles up, and he was growling. The area overlooks fields and forestry land. His 2 house cats shot off the couch and ran for cover. They were found hiding under a bed, hissing furiously when he tried to get them to come out again. This yowling noise lasted for approximately 90 seconds. There was nothing to be seen, even with the torch, but he could hear loud rustling noises beyond the garden. The dog stayed behind him, growling as whatever it was moved away. Last week, the 30th of August 2020, as he took the dog for his late walk before bedtime, they made their way round one of the fields. And as they were walking, 3 roe deer came running straight out of the forestry at high speed, about 20 yards ahead of him. He just managed to grab the dog's collar to stop him chasing after the deer, and there was a loud crashing noise that sounded like something big was shoving through the trees. He saw a very large dark shape, which stopped when it saw him, and it turned back into the forest. When he described the height of the shape of this thing, he said it was approximately 7 feet tall. It happened too fast for him to get a photograph of it, and it was over in a matter of seconds. And then last night, which would be 8th of October 2020, as he was walking the dog, he had a large salmon thrown at him, but he couldn't see the thrower. He said all was totally silent out in the forest. There were no bird sounds, no small animals, nothing. He did manage to get a photo of the salmon though. I have to say, I had a similar thing happen at Clodymos and Culloden a couple of years ago now when I was investigating the hairy man sightings. The salmon spawn any time between late February each year. Is this a coincidence, possibly? She said, I can't work out where the salmon was drawn from. I think the only explanation is a passing osprey, maybe, but there are none in the area that I know of. He might have been more grateful for the salmon if it hadn't hit him on his shoulder really hard, but as you can see from the photograph, it's taken a bit of a knock before reaching him. I would also say there's a very strange woman who's moved into a cottage near him, and she's taken to putting up hides and cameras in the woods, and has even put up a notice warning people to keep out. But the land is not her woods, they belong to the big estate. Local rumour has it she works for a TV company, possibly the BBC. As the crow flies, it's not too many miles from my relative's house to the area where Felicity the puma was caught by Ted Noble on his farm at Kenny some years back. Honestly don't know if there could be a connection there, Deb. On the 28th of October, she said, my relative was taking the dog for a wee walk around the farm road just now and he heard wailing. It sounded like a cat on steroids, and that was his expression. It was a loud wailing, but it sounded as if it was off in the distance, so perhaps it was the same thing he'd heard weeks ago. The dog reacted to the wailing and grumbled a bit, but the noise was going away from them, so it wasn't too upset. When investigating these reports and looking at cattle and pet disappearances in the area, I came across some very distinct cat-killed sheep. They show all the signs of a cat attack: bites to the neck area, and the carcass is dragged off into the trees or covered with grass. But I also came across a number of strange cases where the animal that had been killed had its skin removed by the hand, and every bone was picked clean of meat. There was no sign of cars or ATVs at the scene, no human footprints or boot marks, no sign of entry or an exit wound, no arrowhead embedded in the body. One farmer stated a hefty and healthy ewe of about 50 kilo was taken. Her wool was neatly peeled off her skin before it was eaten. Another farmer said that over the past 5 years, about 40 sheep from his flock have been found dead, apparently killed in one go, all neatly stripped of their skin before being eaten. Whatever animal is doing it, it manages to peel the skin off the sheep, probably because it doesn't like the wool, and it skins the sheep in the most expert way, removing the skin along with the wool. It has a very powerful bite, and it crunches right through the bones and kills the animal very easily. Is this creature feeding on sheep and cattle, combined with the deer as they move through the area, heading from the east coast across the lochs at Ness and Rannoch and Tay? There are ample food and water resources in the area, both on the coast or of the freshwater kind. The habitat is ideal for a creature to remain elusive in as you head southwest using the river systems and the valleys. Stretching from Nairn to Findhorn Bay, Culloden is a big forest made after the village of Culloden disappeared in the Great Sand Drift in 1694. In the decades that followed the Great Drift, the sand kept shifting, with remains of the original state becoming exposed. This would be a good stopping over area when the salmon is running as you make your way south, heading west, for Ayrshire and the west coast. There are several missing cases in the surrounding areas. Looking at the missing people cases in the area didn't prove fruitless, and there's a case currently being worked by the police in the area after a man went missing just 3 weeks ago on Christmas Eve. Mark Drossel was last seen in the Agonach Woods area at around 3 p.m. on Tuesday, December the 24th. Mark, who was travelling north to Aviemore, was seen in the Abernathy National Nature Reserve near Nethy Bridge between Thursday, December the 19th and Saturday, December the 21st. Detectives have revealed he has since been seen in the Agonach Woods area in Granton around 3 p.m. on Tuesday. The 28-year-old is described as a white man, around 5 feet 9 inches tall, slim build, dark hair. And at the time of his disappearance, Mark was believed to be wearing a black putter jacket and carrying a blue rucksack. The next cluster of reports of creatures and missing people take us to the area of Loch Ness, Loch Rannoch. Rannoch itself has a strange relationship with the missing, as it's said that caves below Rannoch cause people to disappear, never to return, or children that vanish appear miles away with no memory of how they got there. A local man went missing when he was out walking his dogs, and as of yet, no sign of his whereabouts is known. Officers in Beulah are continuing to appeal for information regarding the whereabouts of a 73-year-old James Patton, 1 year on from when he was reported missing from his home in Beulah. James Patton, 73 at the time, was seen around 1:30 p.m. on Monday, the 23rd of December, driving his silver Dacia Duster at Ruttle Woods near the River Beulah, where he was going to walk his dog. His car was traced there, and around 4:30 p.m. that same afternoon, with his spaniel collie cross dog inside, but there was no trace of Mr. Patton. He's described as white, 5'8" in height, and of stocky build, with grey hair and a beard. He wears glasses, and when he was last seen, he was wearing black trousers with a purple jumper and a green fleece jacket. Nobody knows what happened to the two men. No sign of them has ever been found. And like all of the other missing people we've mentioned tonight, there's no sign of them out there. And there is one really strange case that's of interest. I think you'll be interested in it, and that's the case of Sean Richer. And he was 20 years old when he went missing on the 31st of October 2014 from Fraserburgh, Scotland, after a night out with friends. He was last seen running from a farmhouse near Woodland between Stricken and the A98 Fraserburgh to Banff Road. Described as 5'9", of slim build, with mousy brown hair, pale complexion and blue eyes, Sean was wearing a white t-shirt, a grey hooded top, grey skinny jeans, and brown trousers. A few days after Sean disappeared, his hooded top, his belt, and his trainers were found near the farmhouse. It is totally out of character for him not to have got in touch with his parents, and for this reason, they believe he came to harm that night. Police have found no evidence of criminality, yet foul play cannot be ruled out, and it remains a missing person case. Sean's case is cold, and no investigation or update has been announced in his disappearance. Scotland in October would have been cold, so what made him leave the warmth and safety of that farmhouse and run into dark woodland, removing his clothes, away from any help? Is this a situation like the family in Deeside, who saw a wolf-like creature watching them through a cottage window one night? Or the case of the missing woman in Monton? Is Sean still out there, waiting to be found? Extensive searches were carried out, but he still remains missing. How many other cases are like this that we don't know about? How deep does this go? Over the next few months, I'll be delving deep on some of the cryptid hotspots in the UK to see if the same anomalies come into play. I hope you enjoyed tonight's podcast. My name's Deborah Hatswell, and I've enjoyed spending my time with you guys. It's blowing a hoolie out there. It's thick snow and continuing to snow. So it's a good day, to curl up and share some of my reports with you all. Don't worry, I'll be back on the same day, the same time, next week. Good night, everyone.